Things don't always work out the way you hope. And this is just one of those cases when you need a thoughtful and reliable plan to take revenge on your unfaithful wife, who thinks she is something more than who she really is. I really disliked the gatherings at the country club that took place every few weeks. It felt like they always had some excuse to throw a meaningless party, just so a bunch of wealthy people could get together and stroke their egos. My wife Sandra loved attending these events and seemed to look forward to them. Unfortunately, over the past year or so, she started drinking too much and sometimes ended up embarrassing herself or me. Sandra and I had been married for 24 years, and we had 3 kids, all in college. I met her while I was pursuing my MBA, and we clicked right away. However, about 10 years ago, things between us started to cool off, which I assumed was natural. I would have appreciated more affection and intimacy, but I didn't want to push it. Eventually, I just accepted that the rest of my life would probably be less romantic than I'd hoped. I had a great job that paid well. Supporting 3 kids through college took a significant chunk out of our savings, but we were still financially secure. Sandra, of course, didn't need to work and had no desire to. She spent her time doing community work and socializing, all of which was funded by my income. She still looked good for her age, probably thanks to regular visits to the spa and salon. As for me, I was pretty average. Some extra weight around the middle and gray hair starting to show at the temples. I dressed well, mostly due to my job and Sandra's love for shopping. While I was competent at my work, I wasn't truly happy. I was ready to try something new, something I'd actually enjoy without worrying about the paycheck. I also wanted to move. The house was far too big for just the 2 of us, and I hated the upkeep costs and effort, but my wife wouldn't even entertain the idea of discussing it. She wanted her big house, country club, and affluent friends. At one of these gatherings, I found myself drifting around the club, jumping into small conversations here and there about trivial matters. The night was winding down, and I'd been nursing my last drink for about an hour. Sandra, however, was just getting into her stride. It seemed she had been drinking more than usual, and it was starting to show. A group of 8 or 10 local socialites were seated together, engaged in what seemed to be a lively discussion about intimacy as I approached. That was my cue to turn around and leave. As I was about to exit, I heard my wife's voice, louder than usual. Hell, if it weren't for Todd Mitchell, I would never have had any good intimacy in my life. The group went silent. Some of the women noticed me standing nearby. Realizing the sudden lack of laughter, Sandra turned and saw me. The alcohol was clearly affecting her judgment. "Robert, I didn't know you were standing there. You weren't supposed to hear that, darling. I'm sorry, my bad." She followed it up with a few drunken giggles like a little girl. The women nearby seemed unsure of how to react. A few quietly walked away, while the rest just sat there, silent. Sandra was looking at me with a smug, playful grin, as if she had just done something mischievous. I set my glass down on a nearby table and calmly left the room, and the club. I didn't go home. Instead, I headed to the airport and, 30 minutes later, boarded a commuter flight to Reno. I preferred Reno to Las Vegas. My relationship with Sandra suddenly became much clearer. Things that had previously confused me now made sense. A weekend in Reno would give me time to figure out a few more things. I switched off my cell phone. I had no difficulty securing a room at one of the casinos. After opening an account with $20,000, I quickly got a complimentary room. What's interesting about casino accounts is that since they aren't banks, they aren't subject to federal regulations, so there's no need to report anything to the government. If you hit a big win on the slots or at Keno, that has to be reported, but deposits into the casino account aren't traceable. I wasn't particularly interested in gambling, but I did appreciate the way their banking worked. By the time I woke up, it was already noon on Saturday. Over a burger and fries, I found myself reflecting on my situation. I liked Reno. The high altitude made the climate comfortable, and the gaming industry meant there were plenty of affordable services nearby. I took a walk along the Truckee River to pay my respects to all the broken marriages. I wasn't planning on a Reno divorce just yet, but I might toss my ring into the river at some point down the line. On my way back to the hotel casino, I passed a real estate office with a lot of property listings in the window. Suddenly, the idea of owning a condo in Reno started to make sense. After spending an hour in the office and 2 more driving around, I found a small, furnished unit that I really liked. The only issue was that I couldn't buy it while still married. Fortunately, I managed to arrange a discreet lease-to-own deal with a large deposit, which was my suggestion, and the seller loved it. One of the smartest moves I made early in my marriage was to handle and control the family finances myself. Sandra didn't have a head for numbers or banking, and she was more than happy to let me take care of the bills as long as she could spend the money. That evening, I treated myself to a fantastic sushi dinner. Before turning in for the night, I added another $10,000 to my casino account from my Visa card. I didn't like paying the cash advance fee, but in this case, I figured it was worth it. I woke up bright and early the next morning and managed to catch breakfast at the casino restaurant. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast really hit the spot. I was killing time with my second cup of coffee when I noticed the waitress had a noticeable black eye. She was trying to cover it by styling her hair forward, but it wasn't doing the trick. She was an attractive woman, probably in her mid-40s. I watched her move from table to table, clearly trying hard to keep all her customers happy. Something about her effort seemed new, like she wasn't quite used to the job yet. A more seasoned waitress would have been smoother and more confident, but I admired her determination. "Your name tag says Donna. Is that your real name?" "No, my real name is Dora, but Donna was the closest name tag they had." "All right, Dora, I'll order 1 more cup of coffee, and I'll leave a big tip if you tell me how you got the black eye." "How about I pour you a refill? You leave a smaller tip and I ignore your question." "Fair enough. That was rude of me to ask." Since I already had the key to the condo, I decided to pick up some essentials to settle in. My first stop was the Silver Spur used car lot down the street. I grabbed a Ford Focus sedan, which had more miles on it than I'd like to admit. It wasn't great for long trips, but fine for getting around town. I could have rented something, but I was planning to come back regularly for a while. For a couple $100, I got everything I needed to live comfortably, including a few changes of clothes. I spent the rest of the day opening accounts at several casinos. I wrote checks made out to each casino, deposited the money into my accounts, and watched it disappear. No paper trail. By the end of the day, I had deposited $60,000 across 4 different casinos. I even bought a small spiral notebook to keep in my pocket, where I recorded the amounts, dates, and casino names, a running record of my supposed gambling losses over the weekend. Of course, I hadn't gambled a penny, but nobody was going to question me. Everyone knew I was a terrible poker player, so it would be easy to believe I'd lost money playing roulette, craps, or blackjack. I had 6 months to gather the down payment for the condo. That wouldn't be a problem. I completely forgot about lunch, so by the time dinner came around, I was starving. The easiest option was to go back to the same place where I had breakfast. As luck would have it, Dora was my waitress again. "Why are you still here? Seems like you've had a long day." I have to pull double shifts to make ends meet. I didn't expect the rent here to be so high. What can I get you to drink? I figured it was better not to pry, so I ordered my meal and tried to be polite the rest of the time. When I finished, she brought the check and paused for a moment. Sorry for being short with you this morning. I'm having a hard time adjusting to living here, and I'm a bit self-conscious about my eye. My husband gave me that as a parting gift when I told him I was coming here to get a divorce. It's not the first time, but I hope it will be the last. Thanks for the generous tip at breakfast, by the way. It helps. She smiled as she walked away, but it was a sad smile. I thought about her for the rest of the night. That night I realized there wasn't much more I could do immediately. I had to get home and take care of a few things before I could make any more plans here. I had no trouble arranging a flight for the return trip, but I wasn't sure what I would do when I got back. The next morning, Dora was working again, and I managed to sit at one of her tables. When she dropped off the check after my meal, I stopped her. I have a bit of a problem, and I was wondering if you could help. I have to leave today and won't be back for about a week. I need someone to house sit for me. It's a 2-bedroom condo, so you wouldn't have to worry about any issues with space. Would you be able to help out? It'd be for at least a couple of months. Are you serious? No strings attached? I really don't want to leave the place empty. 90% of the time, it'll be just you. When I'm around, I'll stay out of your way. I promise. I honestly didn't care if someone broke in and took everything. There wasn't much of value to lose. But I couldn't let Dora know that. Is it within walking distance of the diner? It's fairly close, but I'm also leaving you my car. Just make sure it always has gas for when I return. I'll give you a call beforehand. There's an answering machine on the phone. Dora just stood there staring at me. I think she was worried it might be a trap. I didn't have time to reassure her. Here are the condo and car keys. The car is at the condo. It's a dark blue Ford Focus. Here's the condo's address. If you're uncomfortable, don't go. I'll get the keys back when I return next Friday. I scribbled the address on a napkin and handed it to her. She took the napkin and the keys, still staring at me. Dora, don't stress about it. If you're okay with it, great. If not, that's totally fine, too. An hour later, I was on a flight home, though I would have preferred to stay in Reno. After retrieving my car from the long-term parking, I drove by the house. Sandra's car wasn't there, so I decided to grab a few things for the rest of the week. I quickly packed up some underwear, clothes, shoes, and my laptop. It took less than 10 minutes. I also grabbed my passport and birth certificate. My job had access to several kitchenette-style units on consignment, and I had the authority to use one of them. I booked it for the next 2 weeks. After plugging in my laptop to charge, I called my eldest son, Jason. I explained to him that his mother and I were going through some issues and that I'd be unavailable for a while. I asked him to inform his sisters and reassure them not to worry. All 3 of them were studying at Auburn, where I had secured a group discount, but still had to cover out-of-state tuition. Thankfully, I could afford it. After hanging up, I plugged in my cell phone to charge and took a shower. The only thing I had eaten on the plane was a bag of peanuts, and I was looking forward to a proper meal. Monday was hectic. First thing, I went to the bank and took out a large second mortgage on the house, one that now exceeded its value. By the end of the month, that would change. From the bank, I contacted Auburn, and we arranged prepaid tuition for the kids. The bank transferred $240,000 directly to the school. That left me with a cashier's check for just over $200,000 to take to Reno. I cashed in 2 CDs, paid the penalties, and closed out the money market account. I decided to leave the credit cards alone until the month's end. By the time I finished, I was already late for work. My loyal secretary was waiting for me with a cup of black coffee and a playful grin. "Good morning, Mr. Terrell. So, are you going to fill me in on what went down at the country club on Friday, or do I have to rely on all the gossip?" "Emily, all the rumors are true. Anything else you need to know?" Without missing a beat, she replied, "What can I do to help?" "Find me everything you can on Todd Mitchell. I think he used to work here, but I'm not sure. Also, reschedule all my appointments and meetings, but don't give anyone an explanation. Any questions?" With a big smile and a thumbs up, Emily headed out of the office. Initially, I thought it would take me weeks to sort everything out, but now it seemed I could wrap it up in just one. I called my lawyer and arranged for an immediate appointment. On my way out, I informed Emily that I wouldn't be taking or returning any calls from my wife, and security should ensure she wasn't allowed into the building. Jerry Proctor was a friend from college. We had always gotten along well, though Jerry never liked Sandra. I knew he'd be the right guy to handle my divorce. "I was at the country club on Friday, Robert. So, I think I know why you're here." "You're right. I'm not trying to be a jerk, Bob, but it's about time." "Right again. I figured as long as I wasn't being publicly humiliated, I could deal with it. That ended on Friday. I'll need access to all your accounts and a couple of powers of attorney. I'll have my assistant prepare everything and give you a call. Is there anything specific I should be aware of?" "Actually, Jerry, the events of Friday triggered something in me. I've developed a gambling addiction. I spent the weekend in Reno and lost thousands of dollars. I'm planning to go back next weekend, and I'm afraid it'll be worse." "Wow, that's rough. I assume you're keeping records of all your losses?" Jerry grinned. "Yes, I am. I'll send you copies of everything." "Definitely do that. And honestly, Bob, I don't think we need to discuss this any further, do we?" "You're right. Anything else you need?" "No, I'm good. Get out there and take care of business. Here's a financial worksheet. Fill it out and bring it back when you come in to sign the papers tomorrow. I've got your back." Just then I realized I had skipped lunch. Back at the office, Emily had a neat little sheet with information on Todd Mitchell waiting for me. She suggested I talk to Wilma Grimm in HR before proceeding with anything else. Wilma had been with the company for what seemed like forever. She ran things efficiently and did her job well. She was always dressed in a business suit with her hair tightly pulled back in a bun. Her confidence gave her an air of intimidation to anyone who met her. If Emily wanted me to see her, it had to be important. "Good afternoon, Mr. Terrell. Please have a seat." She was attempting to make me feel comfortable, but it wasn't working. It felt like being in the presence of a strict schoolteacher. Despite being a grown man in a significant position, I couldn't help but feel a bit intimidated by her. She closed the door to her office. Emily briefed me on the situation. "I don't partake in office gossip, but I deal in facts. Todd Mitchell came to me in confidence 3 years ago. I gave my word that I wouldn't disclose what was discussed, but it seems I can no longer keep that promise. If at any point you are offended by what I say, feel free to leave, and our conversation will be over. If you don't like what you hear, don't get angry with me. I'm simply stating the facts. Do you understand, Mr. Terrell?" "Yes, I understand. I believe I'm mature enough to handle whatever you have to tell me without throwing a tantrum." She gave me a slight frown at my weak attempt at humor. "About 3.5 years ago, your wife Sandra approached Todd Mitchell at a corporate event. There was a lot to drink that night, and by the end of the evening, Todd and Sandra had retired to one of the private offices. Todd was getting married next month. Sandra threatened to inform his fiancée if he did not continue to meet with her for intimacy, He hoped that once he got married, she would leave him alone. But this did not happen. For several months, he dated her under threat of exposure. In desperation, he turned to me for help, and naturally, he had to tell the whole story. In good conscience, I couldn't tell you or anyone else about it. The best solution I found was to move Todd to another office. After he moved to Dallas, Sandra stopped her harassment. Todd never told his wife about the situation. Do you have any questions? It seems that Mr. Mitchell was as much a victim in this situation as I was. I've been thinking about some form of retaliation, but it seems pretty unreasonable right now. Do you have any suggestions, Miss Grimm? Now that you realize you have the power in your hands, I think you should let it go. Todd Mitchell is a valuable employee and a valuable acquisition for the company. Don't ruin his life because of your wife's actions. Thank you for your time. I think you're right. Forcing a relationship with my wife is punishment enough. As we got up, Wilma smiled. Just so you know, it's not Miss. I've been married for 32 years. It was difficult to picture Wilma Grimm in a compromising situation with a man. Yet, perhaps when she lets her hair down, she transforms into some sort of seductress. Suddenly, I found myself imagining a dominatrix and decided to change my train of thought. I had more pressing concerns than Wilma's romantic affairs. Emily had rearranged my entire schedule, leaving me with a clean slate. My wife called 3 times, refusing to accept that I was in Baltimore as Emily had stated. Emily scheduled a meeting for me with the company president the following day, and another with the legal department that afternoon. I asked Emily if she would join me for dinner. She laughed, saying her husband wouldn't approve. Then she suggested I invite Wilma and laughed again. I spent more time in the legal department than I expected, which resulted in a few people working late. I apologized, but they all seemed to be understanding. It turned out to be more complicated than I anticipated. Liquidating my retirement plan for a cash settlement was challenging. Closing out the 401k and shared savings account went smoothly, but it took a while. Cashing in my sick leave, vacation time, and company insurance was easier than most of the other tasks. By that point, it was clear that I was leaving the company. I just hoped that word wouldn't get back to my wife before I had everything settled. I found myself having dinner alone. For some strange reason, thoughts of Dora crossed my mind while I ate. I wondered if she had moved into the condo and if she was still working double shifts. Even though I barely knew her, I felt a strong desire to return to Reno and see her. It felt somewhat childish, and I tried to push the thoughts away. It seemed silly to waste time on fantasies that would never materialize. The following morning, I cashed in 2 whole life insurance policies and canceled 2 term policies. I was surprised by the cash value the whole life policies had accumulated. I could pick up the checks the next day. My car was covered by the company insurance, but I decided to cancel the insurance on Sandra's Lexus. Although the lease was under her name, the insurance was in mine. Before heading to work, I stopped by Jerry's office to drop off the financial form and signed several documents his secretary had prepared. When I returned to the office, Emily had coffee ready. I don't mean to add to your troubles, boss, but you should speak with Calvin Bostic in settlements before you meet with Richard. Richard Ryder was the company president, and I was pretty sure he was already aware of why I wanted to talk to him. The settlements division was located in the basement, to be precise. I couldn't understand why everyone else had windows and natural light while they were stuck in a dungeon. Calvin, Emily mentioned you wanted to see me. Calvin Bostic was a reserved individual who always completed his tasks. He was practical, unexciting yet effective. He guided me to a secluded area. I heard things were escalating in your office. I'm not one for gossip or rumors, but I felt you should be informed about something. About 6 years ago, we had a colleague named Raymond Upright. He was a decent guy, married with 2 kids. After an office party, he got involved with your wife. She kept calling him both at home and in the office. He realized he had made a mistake and wanted to end it, but she wouldn't allow it. She threatened to inform his wife if he tried to break things off. He foolishly called her bluff. 2 days later, Ray's wife threw him out. He started drinking and eventually lost his job. I don't know where he is now. In any case, Ray's wife threatened to tell you about your wife's affair. From what I understand, your wife gave her $10,000 to keep quiet. I don't have any proof of that last part. Thanks, Cal. I wonder if anyone else has any good news for me. I didn't mean to upset you, Mr. Terrell, but Emily insisted I let you know. You did the right thing. I appreciate it. I took the elevator directly to the 9th floor. I arrived a bit early for my meeting with Mr. Ryder, but he brought me in right away. The meeting was brief and to the point. The legal, personnel, and payroll departments would handle everything for me. Once everything was settled, I was to call him personally from wherever I was. He gave me a card with his private cell number on the back. There were no guarantees, no regrets, and no nonsense. While some matters were concluded, others remained open. I simply nodded at him and left without saying a word. When I returned to the office, Emily greeted me with a bright smile and handed me my usual cup of coffee. I smiled back and instructed, "Please book me a flight to Reno for Thursday morning, with a 2-hour layover in Dallas." She gestured for me to look out the window. I saw Sandra in the parking lot arguing with a security guard. She's been down there for over 20 minutes. They won't let her in and she refuses to leave. What do you want to do, boss? It seems the guards have everything in hand. My only concern is finding someone to have dinner with. I really dislike eating alone. I called Jerry to check on things. He mentioned he couldn't do anything until I sorted out the financial issues. I needed to demonstrate that I had no money. At that moment, however, I was financially secure. Between the checks I had, those expected, and my bank balance, I was in a good place. I assured him that I would go to Reno early and not return until I was completely broke. Occasionally, someone would pop their head in to let me know that my wife wanted me to call her. She had all her friends contacting their husbands at work to locate me. I stayed in the office for a few more hours, tidying up to make things easier for my successor. Sandra was perched on the hood of my car, waiting for me to come out. Emily smiled and handed me the keys to her Honda Civic, saying it would provide a good excuse for her husband to pick her up and take her out for dinner. By the way, you aren't planning anything foolish in Dallas, are you? No, just wrapping up some loose ends. No revenge, I promise. I drove to Allentown and had dinner at the Outback. I returned to my apartment before midnight. The next morning passed quickly. I signed additional documents for Jerry, closed all my bank accounts, and canceled all the credit cards. I also arranged to have the utilities shut off at the house for the following week. I collected checks from the bank, insurance company, and my workplace, and I was surprised to discover how much money I had. I got a new cell phone and canceled the ones Sandra and I currently used. I sold my country club membership to an old friend for $23,000. When I stopped by work for the last time, my replacement was already there. He seemed like a decent guy, having arrived from Boston on just a 24-hour notice. He recognized it was a good opportunity for him. Emily knew more about managing the office than I did, so I didn't need to train him. There were a few things at the house that I wished I could keep, but they weren't significant enough to make me go back. Emily asked me to keep her car, and she planned to have her husband pick it up at the airport. I needed to buy a couple of inexpensive suitcases for my belongings at the apartment. If I forgot anything, I could always purchase it in Reno. Suddenly, it struck me that I had completed everything I could. All my assets were now liquidated. I had no stocks, no accounts, and nothing else of value aside from the house which I was giving to my wife. Air Blue was very helpful. They had seats available and were eager to reschedule my flight to an earlier time. I called Jerry at home. "Hey, buddy, just wanted to inform you that I'm leaving tonight. I assume you have everything you need." "I'm all set, Bob. I can actually serve the papers tomorrow, but I still need that financial information as soon as possible." "You might as well go ahead and give it to her. I'll start sending you some evidence of financial irresponsibility as soon as I can." "Be careful, Bob. I don't want either of us to get into trouble. I'm sure Sandra will get a high-powered lawyer, probably from Philly. Of course, he'll be working on contingency and might drop her if things start to go south." "It's all in your hands, Jerry. Do your best for me. Just don't inflate the bill too much. I'll be quite broke soon. And one more thing. See if you can find a guy named Raymond Upright. There's a good chance he might need some assistance. Depending on the situation, I might be the one to help." "Got it, Bobby. Have a safe flight and keep in touch." I contacted the condo and left a message on the machine to inform her that I would be arriving later that evening. I mentioned that I would call, and I didn't want her to be startled when she heard someone at the door. At that moment, I wasn't sure if she would be there or not, but I could hope. It felt strange that I didn't even know this woman, yet I was wishing for some sort of relationship with her. At this stage, even just having her as a friend would suffice. Her circumstances made her vulnerable, and I didn't want to come across as taking advantage of that. I arrived in Dallas early enough to enjoy a leisurely breakfast. While waiting in Todd Mitchell's office, he entered, and I could tell he wasn't pleased to see me. "Mr. Terrell, I'd like to say it's nice to see you, but I wouldn't be truthful. We both know that." "Take it easy, Todd. I hope you don't mind my being a bit informal. I'm not here to give you a hard time. I just wanted to let you know that I understand the situation you were in some time ago, and there are no hard feelings. You could have done that over the phone. I know, but since I was in the area, I thought it was worth my time to clear the air in person." "I don't get it. Why would you want to do this? I'm the one who messed up and should be apologizing to you for what happened. You didn't do anything wrong. I was young and foolish and made a terrible mistake. I'm still too ashamed to even tell my wife." "While you were partly to blame for what happened, Todd, I believe most of the issues stemmed from my wife. Her actions created problems for you and for me. I'm not saying you were entirely innocent, but it wasn't solely your fault. I don't want you to carry more guilt than necessary because my loving wife was unfaithful." "That's very generous of you to say. I'm not sure what to say or how to respond." I reached over and handed him one of Jerry's cards. "Later today, please give my lawyer a call. There's a chance he may ask you to assist me with something. It will be kept very confidential. He might say he doesn't need anything right now, but at the most, I expect he'll request a notarized statement confirming the affair. I assure you, it won't reach your wife." I stood up and we shook hands. It felt strange, considering this was one of the men who had betrayed me, but it seemed fitting. Todd Mitchell was a good man who didn't deserve to have his life disrupted because of one mistake, even if it had happened multiple times. An hour later, I was on my way back to Reno. I was trying to understand what I had done wrong. I worked hard to give my wife and children everything they wanted or needed, and I believed I had done well. However, it seemed that while I was ensuring everyone else was taken care of, I had been neglecting my wife. When faced with situations like this, we all try to figure out why they occurred. In my case, I often conclude that I must bear some responsibility. I can accept that, but as the situation unfolds, I must confront Sandra's efforts to humiliate me. That is something I cannot accept or excuse. Had she been discreet, I might have let it go and continued to blame myself. Since she wasn't discreet, I refuse to hold myself accountable. The evening concluded on a positive note. Upon my arrival at Reno Tahoe International, I was pleasantly surprised to find Dora waiting for me at the baggage claim. She was dressed in jeans and a light blue Oxford shirt, which was the first time I had seen her in anything other than her uniform. I hadn't intended for her to pick me up when I called. I merely wanted to inform her of my arrival. "Good evening, Dora. I didn't expect to see you here. I thought since I had your car, it was the least I could do." "Aren't you working?" "No, I managed to reduce my hours because of your generous offer." "Oh, I wasn't being generous. I was just looking for a way to have some time alone with you." "And what do you plan to do with me when we're alone?" "I'm not sure yet. I haven't thought that far ahead. Do you have any ideas?" As I collected my bags from the carousel, I noticed a slight blush on Dora's cheeks. I realized it was time to ease off a bit before I frightened her away. It seemed to me that she was teasing with her question, which I took as a positive sign. 30 minutes later, we returned to an apartment that had been recently redecorated. The changes were subtle and inexpensive, yet they significantly enhanced the overall atmosphere of the place. To express my gratitude for her efforts in sprucing up the apartment and picking me up from the airport, I treated her to 2 prime rib dinners. I think Dora appreciated the wine more than the meat. "How is the divorce progressing?" "Not well at all. I still have 3 weeks before I can file. You need to establish residency for 6 weeks. From what everyone has said, I thought this would be a breeze. I probably would have been better off handling it from home." "Why didn't you?" Dora paused for a moment, fiddling with her food before looking up. Getting away from Tony was more important than actually getting the divorce. The divorce is just a piece of paper. It won't stop any future beatings. I think I used the idea of divorce as a way to justify coming out here. It didn't matter where I ended up. What mattered was that I left. What Dora said resonated with me. Initially, getting divorced from Sandra seemed crucial, but now I wasn't so sure. My main concern was preventing her from benefiting from our marriage. Unless I intended to marry again, it didn't really matter, and I had no desire for that. The rest of the evening passed with us discussing more everyday topics like hobbies, films, and books. Dora didn't have any children, and I didn't inquire about it. That night, we slept in separate bedrooms. Dora had already left for work by the time I got up. There was fresh coffee waiting for me, which was all I needed. I was still satisfied from the previous night's meal. After a quick shower, I got to work. "Jerry, how's my favorite lawyer doing?" I heard a sigh on the other end of the line. "Not great, Robert. I've got some bad news for you. Promise me you won't shoot the messenger?" "Oh no, I've only been away for a day. What on earth happened?" "Sandra has really stirred things up. She found out about the bank accounts and other issues. After contacting the police, she secured a restraining order against you. All your accounts are frozen, even the empty ones. You can't get near her or the house, take anything from there, or contact your children, even though they're legally adults. A lot of it is nonsense, but fixing it will take a lot of time and money. She even reached out to the SEC regarding your 401k and retirement accounts. Somehow she's gotten the IRS involved as well. Jerry, I have to be honest with you. I don't want to be involved in any of this. I'm out. Do you understand? I felt a bit overwhelmed. So, you mean you won't be handling my divorce? You got it, buddy. Just so you know, she hired a private investigator to track you down. I wonder how she's affording all this. Don't know, and I don't care. Remember, if the cops or feds ask me where you are, I'll have to tell them. I'm not risking my career for you, even as a friend. I understand, Jerry. Look out for yourself. I'll make some changes on my end and won't call you for a while. Thanks for understanding, buddy. I hoped you would. See you later. Well, that certainly complicated things. The best laid plans can fall apart in an instant. I had to switch to Plan B, but I didn't have one. My brilliant idea of pretending to lose all my money in the casinos was no longer an option. I decided against calling anyone else. Dora left me the car, which I appreciated. I had no idea how she got to work. I was left with a small duffel bag filled with cash and checks. I had to visit 6 different casinos to cash all my checks, either for chips or credit. I was wary of going to the banks in case there was a hold or a trace on anything. The casinos were more than happy to assist me. By the end of the morning, I had everything deposited at various locations, along with a bag full of cash and chips. After a quick lunch, I began withdrawing the funds. Within 2 hours, all the chips had been converted to cash, and I had emptied the casino accounts. I was now holding a substantial amount of money in a large bag. So far, everything had gone smoothly, with no issues or suspicions. It took me less than an hour to drive to Carson City, where I rented a large safety deposit box at a small, nondescript bank to store everything, keeping only $5,000 for spending. I felt a wave of relief knowing everything was secure. I looked forward to another long dinner with Dora to celebrate. However, I sensed something was off as soon as I walked into the condo. Dora was frantically trying to fix things that shouldn't have been disturbed in the first place. She glanced up at me and instinctively covered part of her face. I'm sorry, Robert. It's my fault. I don't know how he found me, and I had no idea he was following me until I got home. I should have been more careful. I'm truly sorry. I gently pulled her hand away from her face, revealing a fresh bruise and a swollen lip, with a large dark mark on the right side of her face. Was it Tony? She nodded in response. He had his 2 brothers with him. They're out searching for you now. Tony told me not to leave the condo. Where are they looking? I gave them the names of 3 casinos. They're such idiots, they don't even know what you look like. I don't think they're thinking clearly. It was a no-brainer. We couldn't stay, and we certainly couldn't call the police. We left everything behind, drove west, and spent the night at a small motel in Grass Valley. It only had 1 bed, but I was a gentleman. I brought some takeout back to the room and picked up some makeup for Dora. She did her best to conceal the bruises, but it still looked terrible. She kept apologizing to me throughout the night, and I was relieved when she finally fell asleep. The next day, we drove into Sacramento to pick up some clothes and personal belongings. I had no idea when we would be able to return to the condo, but I had booked the Grass Valley Motel for 2 more nights. Dora and I spent the following days getting to know one another. There was no intimacy or suggestive comments. Surprisingly, I felt more at ease with her after just 3 days than I had with my wife over 24 years. When I wasn't talking to Dora, I was preoccupied with everything else happening around us. I was hesitant to take Dora back to the condo for fear that Tony might find her. I was also afraid to return myself in case someone was looking for me, yet I had foolishly left my laptop, passport, and other important documents there. I convinced myself that those items were crucial, and I needed to retrieve them, which was a foolish thought. Although I had only known Dora for a few days, I felt I had to place my trust in her. We were both in a similar situation regarding our spouses. Have you ever been to Mexico? Number, are we going to Mexico, Robert? I'm not sure. Look, if things don't turn out well, I need you to promise me something. I don't want you to get into trouble, and I want to keep you safe from Tony. Robert, you don't owe me anything. You've already done more than enough. I'll be fine. I'm just uncertain about how things will unfold for me. I have a significant amount of money saved up. It's not illegal, but I'm hiding it from my wife. If something happens to me, you'll need to help me retrieve it. Who is after you? You haven't mentioned that. Did you do something illegal? There are several federal agencies looking for me, along with a private investigator. I'm sure the local police will join in if needed. All I'm trying to do is keep some money away from my wife, who's trying to frame me for something illegal. What am I supposed to do with this money? I've been thinking about that. Go to Guadalajara and wait for me. Use whatever funds you need to get by until I arrive. How will you find me? Go to the Libertad market for coffee every morning. It's quite large, but I'll locate you. When should I do this? When you realize I'm in trouble. Why not just go now? Be patient. I'd prefer to take you with me rather than go separately. I'd feel more comfortable if we went together. Why can't we both leave now? The conversation began to feel repetitive, so I chose to ignore her. I didn't intend to be rude. I was just eager to move forward. 2 hours later, we had crossed the pass and arrived in Carson City. Dora's name was added to the access list for the safety deposit box, and she received her own key. Upon returning to the condo, I parked about half a block away. The complex featured a lower-level parking area beneath the units. It was open to the outside, but still covered. I instructed Dora to stay in the car until I was certain there wouldn't be any issues. What kind of issues? I had no clue. With everything going on lately, anything was possible, and it happened. As I walked through the parking area, scanning for anything unusual, it occurred. Robert Terrell, turn around. He was a small, wiry man. The long leather coat he wore gave him a strange appearance rather than a sinister one. He wasn't threatening enough to pull it off. However, the large black gun in his hand was definitely menacing. Do I know you? A wide smile appeared on his face, as if he was proud to reveal his identity. My name is Laszlo. Your wife sent me. Good. How can I help you? I need your wedding ring and wallet. I understand why you need an engagement ring, but why a wallet? I have to make it look like a robbery. Make it look like a robbery? Your wife hired me to deal with you, Mr. Terrell. I hope she paid you in advance because she doesn't have any money. What do you mean? That was the end of the conversation. 3 imposing Italians dressed in long leather coats approached from the other side of the parking lot. Bobby Terrell, we need to talk to you. Tony was pretty loud. Laszlo was taken by surprise by the intrusion. He turned to confront the 3 of them, but one of them spotted the gun in his hand. As all 3 reached into their coats, I dove over the concrete barrier leading out of the parking area. For the moment, Laszlo lost interest in me. While I crept along the side of the building toward the car, I could hear gunfire echoing off the garage walls. Just in time, I glanced up to see Dora speeding down the street and 2 men in suits exiting a black SUV across the way. It was clear these suited men were federal agents, likely waiting for me. The gunfight provided just enough distraction for me to escape the area. Dora was gone. The car was gone. There was no way I was returning to that condo. I had no idea who shot whom in the parking garage, nor did I want to find out. All I knew for certain was that 3 different groups were after me for various reasons, all at once. I got the message loud and clear. At that point, I had several options. One was to take a bus to Carson City to collect my money. However, I decided against it because I was too exposed. Yeah, exposed. That felt like the right word. I was just trying to escape a deceitful wife. What had happened? Since I chose to let the money sit for a while, I needed to find a place to lay low. I still had over $4,000 in my pocket, which would keep me afloat for a bit. Why was my wife trying to harm me? I assumed she didn't realize there was no insurance money left. I thought she was smarter than that. I made a big mistake by taking the bus to San Francisco. $4,000 doesn't stretch far in the Bay Area. The first $1,000 went toward getting a social security number and ID, so I could at least find a job. I found a room with a shared bathroom and got a job waiting tables at a low-profile restaurant. After about a month, I was earning enough to support myself and becoming a fairly good waiter, with some customers specifically requesting my tables. I hadn't been making payments on my cell phone, so the service was cut off. I hadn't used it since I left Reno. It only cost me a few dollars to get a new prepaid service and about 50 minutes of airtime. I wanted to call Dora, but I had no clue where she was or how to reach her. Instead, I decided to call Jerry. "Hey buddy, it's Robert. Just wanted to check in and get an update from you." Bobby, great to hear from you. Things are still a mess, but not as bad as you might think." "Where the hell are you?" "That's none of your business. The last time we talked, I was surrounded by a bunch of unpleasant people, all wanting something from me. Am I still on the run?" "Well, most of that trouble has cleared up, especially after Sandra got arrested. From what I understand, the IRS is still looking for some payment related to your 401k assets, but other than that, it's mostly good news." "What do you mean Sandra got arrested?" "I thought you'd know about that. Ever heard of a guy named Lester Laszlo?" "Yeah, I met him briefly about 3 months ago. He tried to kill me, but we got interrupted by some other guys who were after me. While they argued about who would get to me, I slipped out the back." "What's his connection?" "Sandra hired Laszlo to kill you. He got pretty badly injured out in Reno and told the police everything. He claimed that Sandra was going to skip out on a $10,000 contract, so he turned her in. Believe it or not, the cops took his word and charged her. She can't post bail, so she's stuck waiting for her trial in jail. Jerry, I'd love to help her, but she tried to have me killed. I think her parents should be the ones to help with her bail, but I certainly won't. Let me see what I can do, Bobby. No one seems particularly interested in you right now. Do you want me to initiate the divorce proceedings again? I believe we have solid grounds this time." "Sure, why not? A divorce would be nice, but honestly, I don't care either way anymore. I suppose it would simplify things." I kept all the previous paperwork, and I think most of it is still usable. Oh, and I forgot to mention, your kids came home when Sandra got into trouble. They were worried at first, but lost interest quickly when the details emerged. They want you to call them to let them know you're all right. I'll reach out to them as soon as I can. How did your money laundering scheme turn out? It was a disaster. I lost control and lost contact. I'll try to check on it next week. Jerry, sometimes even the best laid plans just don't pan out. All right, stay in touch, buddy. One more thing, Jerry. Did Sandra ever explain why she wanted me dead? Not that I know of. I assumed it was for the insurance money, not realizing you had canceled it. I checked in with the kids and everything seemed fine. They felt reassured once they learned that the tuition was prepaid. They were curious about what happened between Sandra and me. But I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Some things would have to wait. I borrowed a car and drove to Carson City. The safety deposit box was empty. She could have at least left a note. I couldn't really complain since I gave her the key and access to the box. Did she go to Guadalajara, or did she find a place where I wouldn't be able to find her? There was only one way to find out. In my San Francisco neighborhood, there were several small travel agencies, most focused on organizing group tours for like-minded individuals, which I didn't quite fit into. However, I eventually found a tour to my favorite Mexican city due to a last-minute cancellation that I was eligible for. It was the first time I had to gather enough money for something. The trip wasn't overly expensive. I just didn't have much cash on hand. I felt at ease because a few of the guys on the trip worked with me at the restaurant. While most of them signed up for the additional excursions, I had different plans. The first 2 days were quite disappointing. The Libertad market was much larger than I had anticipated, and looking back, I realize it was a poor choice on my part. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Dora had taken my money and gone somewhere more exotic, like Bangkok or Tahiti. She had enough money in that safety deposit box to live just about anywhere she wanted. I was torn between waiting for her to appear or searching for her myself, and ultimately ended up doing both. By the 3rd day, it was starting to feel tedious. "It's about time, Robert. Where the hell have you been?" I turned to see Dora with her hands on her hips, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat with a red band. "Say something. I've been going crazy not knowing if you were even alive." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over and kissed her for the first time. I wasn't sure why I hadn't done it sooner, but I was glad I did it now. "That's a pretty sad excuse. Maybe you should try again." The second kiss came with a big hug as I lifted her off the ground. "Dora, I missed you so much. You still need to tell me where you've been for the last month, but I can wait for now. Let's go home and have some lunch." We strolled through the market, hand in hand, and for the first time in a while I felt genuinely happy and content. "Robert, please don't be upset with me, but I used some of your money. I saved most of it in the bank, but I needed a place to stay, so I bought us a house. I thought you wouldn't mind since you had quite a bit of money in that account." The hacienda was stunning, located in a lovely city, and I was with an amazing woman. I love it when a plan comes together. Sandra's parents managed to raise her bail and cover her legal fees. Jerry had no trouble getting her to sign the divorce papers. She ended up facing 5 to 8 years for attempting to have me killed, though I never found out the reason behind it. Todd Mitchell provided Jerry with a deposition, but it was never necessary. Jerry tracked down Ray Upright, who was sober but not in great shape. When Jerry offered to help, Ray requested a hot dog pushcart. For $2,400, I felt better. I settled my issues with the IRS for $4,000. Laszlo is in jail in Nevada alongside Dora's husband and brothers, and we're uncertain how long they'll be incarcerated. Now I was free to go home. My old job, complete with a promotion, awaited me, and the law was no longer pursuing me. Once Dora's Mexican divorce is finalized, we plan to get married. The kids will come down for the wedding during spring break. The house in Guadalajara is lovely, but we're pretty sure we won't stay there full time. Dora wants to keep it as a vacation home. Emily is eager for me to return to work, especially in the new role. It's a promotion for both of us. Dora is open to going anywhere as long as we're together. She wants me to introduce her to Sandra, which should be quite interesting. My plans didn't unfold as I expected, but who am I to complain?